Thank you.
This is great. So for our next talk, we have Todd Fisher. He is a native California's Bay Area. Todd's journey into programming started over 2 decades ago, and he has been privileged to work with many technologies as well as some leadership roles over the years. Todd loves to play the guitar and is always open to jamming out and often enjoys pair programming with strangers. After moving on from Pluralsight, Todd most recently was leading efforts in an AI startup, yes, another one of those, where he built many features in JavaScript that utilize LLMs. So I give you the one, the only Todd Benjamin Fisher. Please
Nice.
welcome him to the stage.
Thank you. Awesome. So I want to take you kind of in this little journey, this intersection between your app's product features and interacting with AI models. As you mentioned, I've been doing this for the last couple of years. Pretty awesome things you do here, especially in JavaScript. So I want to also get kind of this out of the way. There's a lot of hype with AI right now. We have the Gartner hype cycle that, what was it, a couple years ago when ChatGPT came out, there was a big technology trigger. Caused a lot of hype, still a lot of hype out there. I think it's dying down a little bit, but eventually we get to that plateau of like, yeah, this is what we know what the tool can do and what it can't do, that type of thing. So, I think of like microservices or Chia Pets or any number of other things out there that we've had hype over the years. It just kind of follows the same pattern, right? So with that said, like any tool, there are good use cases and bad use cases. There's things in between as well, and there's also trade-offs. So you want to really think of AI as this tool, another tool in your tool belt, and less like this magical thing that'll just change everything and live happily ever after, right? So with that said, please take this poll. So this is just us brainstorming in this room. What are some use cases to build AI in your product? So if you have any ideas, please add that. I'll show the results a little bit later here. So thinking about the simplest way to hit LLMs or AI in JavaScript is probably hitting a web API. So I want to just go through some examples here today about doing that. And the first recipe of the day is let's go ahead and use GPT-4 and run through a simple code example there of how to hit an AI model via JavaScript. So first step there is we want to get the API key and some credit from OpenAI. And then we npm install OpenAI, and then we go jump to the code here. Let me just jump over here. So right here, is this a good size, everyone? Yay or nay? Awesome. Perfect. All right. So very basic example here. So we import OpenAI, we make a new OpenAI object, and then we call this guy right here. It's kind of the meat of the call here. So we say chat completions create, and we pass in both messages and then a model. So the model that we're going to pass in is a GPT-4o mini, so one of the latest and greatest. Yesterday they came out with some other models, but we won't get into that right now. And we're going to also pass in effectively whatever prompt the user gives us, we're going to just pass it in blindly up to the AI model. And the way that a lot of these LLMs work is they effectively have like a back and forth conversation, almost like a chat, right? And so we want to pass in a message in this messages array to go ahead and do that. So let's go ahead and open up Postman here, and we'll just run this example right here. So this is Postman. We have this basic OpenAI setup endpoint that we declared in the code there. And we could do any number of things like maybe you'll tell me a joke, whatever it is. I'm going to hit send here. And if my credits are still there, boom. So why did the Scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field. That's kind of funny. Funnier than other ones. So that's a very basic example of how to use AI. So that is actually hitting OpenAI's API endpoints, running through GPT models, that type of thing, right? Awesome. So what can you do with that? Pretty much anything you could do with ChatGPT, you can essentially pipe through your code and do a number of awesome, amazing things, right? You could create content, you could summarize things, you could help with in-app onboarding, extracting knowledge. There's so many options you could do just with that simple few lines of code right there. But I want to kind of take it a step further today and just share one example before I move on to some of the other cooler stuff here, is let's say you have you have a need to say, hey, you have like a bunch of messages, let's say, like maybe you have like an email messaging app or something, and you want to strip out anything that is sensitive information. So I'm going to just quickly show you how to do that based on this other example here. So in this case, we're going to redact PII. So we set up the express route here, redact this, I called it. And then over here, down here, where we make the AI call, so we see over here, we're saying OpenAI chat completions. We pass in this prompt right here. And if you notice, this prompt has a few lines in there. Effectively, it just says, replace any PII with the word redacted, right? So pretty straightforward. So it's the same idea, minus, of course, I'm adding an additional message here. This is kind of one nice thing to consider here, is when you're building up your array of messages, that last message is the most important. I think of it as like the call to action for the AI. That's the thing the AI is going to try to complete next. And so whatever that last thing is, it's going to weigh heavily, more heavily than anything else in there. But anything before that message, any other messages before that last one, they will also be part of that context to further steer the AI to do good things, right? So in this case, let's go ahead and run this and see what happens here. So going to redact PII. So let's say you have an email that says like, hey, Steve, I tried to email you, blah, 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 bunch of information, blah, blah, blah. I'm just going to go ahead and hit send there. And boom. So all of those things are now redacted. So now at this point, you could actually go and maybe log that to your log somewhere without worrying too much about PII bleeding or a number of other use cases, right? So awesome. And it's important to note that AI is just one piece of your application flow. Very rarely is it going to be like AI is everywhere in your product. You're going to do all these awesome things. It's more like, hey, you have an existing product, and out of this 10-step process, AI is probably in 2 of them. Think of it more like that, less about replacing every single thing in there. So oftentimes we have to deal with unstructured data, making sense of unstructured data. For example, maybe a user uploaded like a text file full of 8 pages of data, and you want to parse it out in some way. AI is a good use case for that. At my last company, we had a need to extract company information from our users to then further inform additional AI coolness. And so in that scenario, we actually said during the onboarding process, wouldn't that be cool if the user just typed in their website URL and we would just basically pull that information from that URL and make sense of it. And so in this case, I want to run through this example really fast here. Jumping into, not that guy, code. Oh, not that guy. Sweet, okay. Sweet. So in this example, we're going to be making a new endpoint called scrape URL. And it's going to do 3 things. It's going to go and get the actual file from the server, whatever the website is. It's going to make sense of that HTML file, and then it's going to extract that company information. So let me just jump down here and show you a little bit about that. So pretend to scrape URL. So this is actually not actually scraping the URL. In this case, it's just downloading a file locally. But you could use a tool like Scraping Bee, a number of other tools out there if you wanted to scrape a website, for example. Moving on here. Cheerio, I was first introduced to this package via testing. You could use it for more than testing, for what it's worth. Scraping is a good use case here as well. Ultimately, what we're doing here is we're just going to parse the text from that raw HTML file into usable things that we could push up to the AI there. And so ultimately, what we do is we loop through each element, and we get the text of each element. We throw it into an array. We snap it to a set, of course, make it unique, that type of thing. And then we go over to this third function here, ask AI to extract company information. And so if you notice, this prompt is a little bit bigger than other prompts. So what we found in the things that we've been building is depending on the prompt, you actually have to give it a lot of detail to make the results a lot better, as opposed to you get kind of the subpar results if you just have like a 1-sentence prompt in some cases. And so some of those things include adding examples, adding explicit instructions, that type of thing. We find that greatly increases the quality of the AI responding there. You could also go through fine-tuning and some other options, but in this case, this scenario, this was sufficient for our needs. So at the end of the day, we call that completions API again, and we get the results. So let's go ahead and see how that works. So scrape data, we're going to just pass in this URL. So it could be any URL in here. In this scenario, I just kind of put in this URL right here. I'm going to hit send here and see what happens. So in this case, it's going to do each of those things. It's going to scrape the website, aka load it from a file. It's going to parse it with Cheerio, and then the AI responds with this. This is awesome because now you have a data set that you could then parse into a JSON blob or whatever the use case may be in your database, wherever it's at, and you could actually use this in other parts of your app, right? So pretty awesome, pretty powerful there, combining things like that. I want to quickly cover some of the frontier models out there with LLMs specifically. OpenAI is out there. I think we all know about them. Anthropic is essentially OpenAI, but not trying to take over the world with AI. They're a B Corp. They're trying to do good things with AI. Google is out there doing some Gemini stuff. Mistral, Next. Those are some of the big players out there. There's a lot more, of course. But some of the things you want to consider when choosing AI models, in this case, all these models are via web APIs. That's pretty awesome, pretty convenient. They can come at a cost that could be a little bit more than hosting yourself. And of course, privacy is a big topic. We've learned over the past couple of years that a lot of people are afraid of company data being trained on models to then potentially leak into other companies, other competitors, that type of thing, right? Latency is another cool issue as well. There's network latency as well as model latency, because with a lot of LLMs, you go through kind of token by token, and sometimes that's streaming, sometimes it takes a while, so you want to consider that. And of course, depending on the model you use, lawyers could be a thing you have to think about as well. So be careful with that. So I want to talk a bit about self-hosting models. So we talked a bit about the web API stuff. That's pretty awesome. But if you ever wanted to self-host your own model, maybe it's privacy, maybe you just want to tinker around. One cool option there is called Ollama. You simply just download it and you open up a terminal window. You run Ollama run, the model name, and then you add a prompt, and it's pretty awesome, right? On top of that, kind of more interesting here is if we could expose that via an Express endpoint, that'd be awesome, because then we could have client apps go and actually hit that API, and we could effectively run it for a lot cheaper in some cases, right? And so I want to go through this example really fast. You just simply install the Ollama package, npm install, you add an Express route, and you summon Ollama chat. So let me just cover that really fast here. So self-hosting. So we have this Llama route this route, Express route of Llama chat. And we, very similar to the OpenAI syntax, we have ollama.chat. We pass in a model name, and we pass in the messages array. So different models in general, but between OpenAI and Ollama, they're roughly the same concept, right? And so let's go and just run that really fast. So we have a prompt in here like, what is 5 plus some other numbers? Let's just run that. It doesn't really matter what the prompt is. You could put in whatever prompt you want in this case, and boom. This is actually running locally on my machine, so you technically wouldn't need any internet to run this prompt right now. So kind of pretty powerful there. So, all right. So I want to talk a bit about function calling or tool calling. I think probably a year ago, OpenAI came out with this idea of function calling, and it's a pretty powerful thing. This is from their website. It's kind of cryptic. I'll get to the summarization, but ultimately what we do here is you have a list of your functions in your app. So let's say you have like 10 functions that you want the AI to know about. You ship it up to the AI, and the AI says, cool, you have these 10 functions. I think right now, given the other context you have that you've given me, I think this specific function needs to be called. So the AI will then return that function and say, hey, call this function. You would then turn around and say, okay, cool, I'm going to go and actually call this function, and so forth. So that's effectively how that works. In summary, it means that the LLM can decide when to call functions in your app. That sounds like that could potentially be a really scary, bad thing, but at the same time, a very powerful thing, because there's a lot of benefits here. Two of the main benefits there is if you've ever worked with LLMs, you've noticed that they make up a lot of facts, and you're just like, what the heck? I don't know. Like I remember about a year ago asking it about the weather, and it was like, yeah, it's like sunny, it's 80 degrees, and I look outside and it's rainy, it's probably 40 degrees. It's like, no, that's not right? So one thing that they do, I think of RAG. So RAG is a option out there. What they basically do is they use a tool to then go and pull whatever information they're missing and then run the actual prompt. So a very powerful thing there. Also enables dynamic flows in your app. So instead of a linear flow of going from step 1 to 5, whatever, you could actually go to different flows. There's so many options in there that we haven't really explored, but there's a lot of cool things there. So ultimately, at the end of the day, you give the AI a list of functions, and if the AI returns a function, you call it. So let's go to the code and see kind of how that would work. So in this case, I have a few functions in my app. So this is one function declaration. So redact PII, so previous example here. this is the format that you would do is you'd say, hey, here's a function. The name of it is redact PII. The description is whatever this is. This helps the AI understand why it should call it, basically. And then you also could pass in parameters that the AI could generate. So that's pretty powerful, right? So we have redact PII. We have a few other functions in here. Get the company URL from the database. This is an interesting one because unless your app is downloading all data known to man that you'd ever need, this is particularly useful because you could actually load data on the fly based on if the AI needs it or not without having to preload it beforehand, right? So pretty powerful in that regard. And that's, of course, part of RAG. So, and then, of course, another function called scrape company info. We run those put those into an array of available functions. And then really all we do is we call the same API there. We just have an additional tools that we just pass them up there. And then we'll, of course, get a list and parse it out and see how it goes, right? So let's go ahead to Postman here. So I need to write an email about a client named Skynet. Can you look up the company information, tell me more about them? I'm going to go ahead and press send here. Drum roll. Boom, there it is. And so we see that the AI replied with, hey, I think you should call this function called get company URL from database. So pretty awesome, right? A more extreme example there is a lot of times you want to call it multiple times because maybe there's 3 or 4 different pieces of information that you're missing and the AI knows about it. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to just jump into this other example of effectively we call it once, we get the response of that, we run the function, and then we add to the messages array the response of that function and so forth. And I'll explain that a little bit better. But let me just start this off because this takes a little bit of time here. So this is essentially chaining the call or repeating the call over and over again until we get enough information for the AI to be satisfied that we have enough context to then deliver a valid result. So pretty soon here, hopefully. Let me actually just look over here. So making AI call 3, final call, so it's about done. So it does take some time, so that's another thing to consider there. Wait for it. Boom. So the AI returns with, based on your previous question, here's a bunch of information, yada, yada. Most interesting is this messages sent array. So if you remember the messages you sent up to the AI for convenience of this presentation, I just threw these in here in the response so we could see what the messages were. So if we go down to the bottom, so this is the initial message we gave, this is the initial prompt, right? The AI then said, hey, cool. This is the results from getting the company information and so forth. So you can actually build up this chain of conversation, if you will, by calling a bunch of tools, a bunch of functions in your app. And then at the end of the day, that very last call that you call to the AI, that's going to give as much context as possible and give you a better result. So cool, awesome. So let's go ahead and check out the poll results. So this is, what are some use cases for AI in products you use or build? So a lot of cool things in here. Initial customer support call, a lot of details. I like this, this is awesome. Summarizing, chatbot, writing tests. So we see there's a lot of use cases. There may be some that are not represented here. There may be some that don't make sense for you. That's fine. I just want to kind of show this as one possible tool out there for when you have that idea of like, maybe the AI can help with this. Maybe we should use an LM for this feature. Maybe this will actually solve an actual user issue, whatever it may be. So with that said, I want to talk just very briefly about AI on the client side, and there's kind of that question of like, why would you use it on the client side? Potentially, these are some of the benefits there. Offline apps, less latency. It could be cheaper in some cases, that type of thing. One thing to kind of note there is the AI models that we use nowadays, a lot of them are very big. Llama 3 is 231 gigabytes. That's very big for a browser to handle, so that's probably not a good idea to have in there. So typically speaking, on the client side, looking for smaller AI models out there. Here are some options out there, some projects out there. So if you're interested, check out these. These are some cool things you could do with that type of thing. And of course, to continue the AI conversation on the client side, check out Clint's talk. He's going to be talking, I think, in a couple hours, whatever that is. So, and with that said, thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to come up and ask. So, thanks.